Calvin Murray is a small-town guy from Greenville, North Carolina. It has been his lifelong dream to one day move to the big city, start his career, and make a good future for himself. After a lot of hard work, he earned his master's degree in North Carolina and applied for accountancy jobs at various banks and firms in a number of cities, especially in Chicago. Calvin was single, young, and ambitious. He wasn't afraid to start a new life, somewhere absolutely foreign to him. He knew he would eventually figure things out. But Calvin had an attraction for Chicago. The tall buildings, the towers, the beautiful Lake Michigan, and not to mention gorgeous city women. It was finally after 2 years of trying, Calvin's dream was to come true, when he received a job letter from a big company in Chicago. He immediately booked a flight and a hotel room for the interview, which was in just 3 days. Reaching there, Calvin was anxious. This was his big chance. He couldn't let it slip from his hands. Dressing his best, he attended the interview. Though he was nervous, his employers greeted him with a smile, were impressed by his credentials, speaking to him, and Calvin conveniently ended up getting hired. Welcome to our company, Mr. Murray. We were searching for someone like you for this position. Thank you, ma'am. This is a really big opportunity for me. I'll give my best. So when will you be moving to the city? I've actually settled here already. I'm temporarily booked at a hotel room until I find an apartment around this area. Good luck. Wow, she was smiling a bit too much in the interview. Was she checking me out? Within a few days of living in Chicago, working at the firm, Calvin was introduced to a few other guys at the office. However, as the week passed and he was struggling to find a place, he was getting a bit worried. Don't stress it, man. That's just how it is here. To find a good apartment in a good neighborhood, it takes a lot of time, a lot of waiting on the list, and I won't even mention the cost of the rent. It was true, the rent was really high, and Calvin was yet to afford that kind of place with his current salary. But maybe in a year or two? As of now, Calvin decided to look for an apartment in a bad neighborhood for a temporary stay. Within a few days, he managed to find a vacant apartment at a complex about half an hour away. The building was 6 stories high, and his apartment was on the 4th floor. Yes, the environment wasn't great, and probably the tenants weren't either. But since he was planning to move out soon anyways, he didn't bother getting to know any of his neighbors. The weekend passed with no rest at all, moving in and fixing up the apartment, and after 2 days of work, Calvin was exhausted. On Wednesday night, after work, Calvin dropped by a pizzeria and got a long-wanted deep dish pizza, Chicago style, and trudged his way home. He let out a heavy sigh, looking at the stairs. Very unfortunately, the building was old and didn't have an elevator. As he started climbing up, he heard the sound of heavy footsteps rushing down. And soon, he saw a man. He was dressed in a long overcoat, his hat pulled down low over his face. Calvin stopped for a second and smiled politely. "Hello," he said, trying to be nice. But strangely, the man didn't answer or even look at him, and roughly pushed past Calvin and hurried down. As his pizza fell to the ground, probably face first, Calvin stared at the man. Jerk, gotta move out of here soon. Finally reaching his apartment 4 stories later, Calvin went straight to the bathroom. While he was washing his hands, he took a glance in the mirror when he noticed something odd. There was a dark, brownish red stain on the sleeve of his shirt. Is that blood? Did I get a cut? Calvin checked his arm, but he was fine. Then he remembered that strange man who had bumped into him down the stairs. He suddenly felt sick. Who knows where this blood came from? But then all the suspicions and bad thoughts started to arise. Who was he? And where exactly did this blood come from? Calvin immediately went down to check if he had locked the front door properly. He then took a long hot shower and threw the bloodstained shirt in the trash. Unsurprisingly, he didn't sleep well that night. Only one thought roamed in his mind. Gotta find a new place, gotta move out of this neighborhood. The next morning, Calvin locked up the apartment well before he left for work in a hurry. He had made plans with some newly made friends to check out Chicago and at the same time note down some vacant apartments if he could. So he wasn't going to be back for 2 days and a night. Hey, Calvin, my man, how are things going? Pretty good. What about you? Good. You guys, meet my friend. He recently moved to the city. Calvin, this is Jack, Lisa, Tony, and Monica. The little getaway turned out great. Checking out bars, bonfires, and barbecues by the lake. But what was more amazing was getting to know Monica. So how was it like back in North Carolina? The weather was always so warm. Missed going to the beach. Well, it gets cold here, and we don't have a beach, but we have a lake. Yeah, reminds me of home. Have you ever gotten into the water at night? Why? For me, the thrill. For you, a remedy to being homesick? What are you doing? I don't think I'm going home anytime soon. Monica was beautiful, sassy, and wild. They hit it off great, exchanged numbers, and after 2 days of hanging out with friends, they were planning on a more personal date. Just the two of them. On Friday afternoon, Calvin finally returned to his apartment. Tonight was his special date with Monica, and he needed to get ready to make good impressions. By the way things were going, he was hoping to spend the night at her apartment, as the weekends were coming anyways. Around 7 p.m., as Calvin was getting ready to leave, he heard his doorbell ring. Who's that now? Shoot, I'm already late. Calvin didn't want to waste any more time, but peering through the peephole, he felt a bit nervous seeing a police officer standing outside. What was he here for? Was this about the guy from that day? Did something happen around here? Am I going to get wrapped up in some trouble now? Gathering his composure, Calvin loudly asked, "Who is it?" "This is the police. I'm sorry to disturb you, sir. I was here to ask you some questions." "About what?" "Perhaps if we can talk in person, it would be more convenient." "I'm running a bit late. Could you please tell me what it's about?" "There was a murder in the apartment next door to yours 2 days ago. You're probably the only person who can help. Perhaps you saw or heard something unusual." Nervously, Calvin quickly said, "I didn't see anything." That was a lie, but Calvin didn't want to get himself involved in all this. After so much struggle, he moved to the city, he started working his dream job, and running into trouble with the law wasn't going to look good on his records. "You may be able to help us. Did you know your next door neighbor? Did you see anybody suspicious? Can you at least open the door to talk? It'll only take a minute." Feeling a bit guilty, Calvin opened the door. "I'm new in this building. I don't know any of my neighbors, and I haven't been home in the past few days or nights." The officer tried to question him about the simplest details, but Calvin denied knowing anything. "I'm sorry, officer. I really need to get going. I can't help you." With despair, the officer said, "All right, sir. Thank you for your time." Calvin closed the door and continued getting ready for his date. He had just dodged a very complicated situation, which could have gone very wrong for him and for his future. Who knew the police officer could have suspected him being involved in the crime? Good save, Calvin. Good save. Calvin had to give himself some credit on how smooth he was with the police. That night, Calvin met Monica at a nice restaurant. They had a great time and things went perfect. She was an amazing person, independent and very understanding. Whenever Calvin was with her, he could simply drown in her eyes and forget all his worries. But Monica did suspect Calvin was a little disturbed. "You look a bit tensed. What's wrong? Something on your mind?" "It's nothing major, just my apartment. Gotta move out of that neighborhood." "Oh, so that's the issue. In that case, you have nothing to worry, at least for the next 2 days, because you are going to spend the weekends with me, and you don't have a choice." Spending the night with Monica, Calvin almost forgot about everything. Saturday and Sunday was awesome. Monica was the best cook. She was very interesting and very entertaining. But then it came time for Calvin to leave. Monday was a work day, and if Calvin wanted to stay back here, Monica might get a little spooked by his desperation. He didn't want to mess things up with her. However, now all the stress returned. His next-door neighbor had been murdered. Perhaps he had saw the guy who had done it. Was that where the blood was from? If the police found that shirt, they'd trace it back to him. What a fool, he should have just washed it out. At this moment, the only relief Calvin had was that one of his colleagues informed him he got an apartment for him, but it wouldn't be vacant until next week. But as soon as it would be, Calvin would pack his bags and get out of here. Thinking about everything, Calvin remembered the officer and felt guilty about lying. But then again, he hadn't actually seen the guy's face, right? Oh, who was he kidding? Maybe there was something he could have said that would have helped him catch the criminal. Sometimes crimes are solved by one small detail. Come Monday morning, back at home, Calvin was getting ready for work, wondering if the police had managed to solve the case. Something was bound to come on the news. He turned on the TV and went to the local news channel. But they didn't mention anything about it. He surfed the net, but couldn't find any information. Just forget it, Calvin, it's over. Calvin grabbed his bag and went out the door. But as he was locking up, he started to get a bad odor in the hallway. It seemed to be coming from the apartment next door. Calvin suddenly had a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. He decided to just leave for work and not bother about it, but his conscience led him to the building's supervisor's office. My apartment is on the 4th floor. There's a very bad smell coming from the apartment next to mine. Can you please have something done about it? It's getting difficult to stay there. A bad smell? Nothing of this sort has happened before. Perhaps someone is cooking something crazy in their kitchen, and you're just not used to the smell. No, I'm pretty sure it's not food. It's a putrid odor. Alright, I'll call the tenant and see what I can do. The tenant? There was a murder there a few nights ago. I don't think there's anyone there. What? What are you talking about? The supervisor looked at Calvin as if he were delusional or crazy. But finally, Calvin managed to convince him to come back up to his floor. When the supervisor got to the hallway, he himself was baffled. He held his stomach almost about to vomit. Smells like rotten eggs and fish. He immediately went down to his office and got his bundle of keys to every apartment on the floor. It took a little time, but finally he found the correct key and managed to open the door to the apartment next to Calvin's. Both of them stepped in holding their breath. Is anyone home? It was silent. As they walked down the hall, Calvin froze, seeing drops of blood scattered on the floor. Anxiously, he went around the hall peering in, when his heart began to race by what he saw. A police officer on the floor, unrecognizable. His body was in a dreadful condition, surrounded by a pool of dry blood. The odor was extremely overpowering. The man had been lying here for days. I know this man, but never knew he was a police officer. I've never seen him in his uniform. He was probably an undercop. All of a sudden, Calvin saw something that made him cold. A picture on the wall. Is this the man? Yes, that's him, one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Looks like whoever it was forced him into wearing the uniform before taking his life to humiliate him. This is so tragic. We have to call the police. As the supervisor hurried off to call for help, Calvin suddenly remembered what the police officer kept on telling him that evening. You're probably the only one who can help.
If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to my channel and share this video with your friends and family.